Today on the show, we're keeping in mind Salvor Hardin's lesser known, but equally iconic phrase, Leo.
Yeah.
And I quote, "Podcasting is the last refuge of the incompetent." End quote.
That, I want to say, as our resident white man, I think there's a lot of white men who need to hear that.
Honestly, a lot of men probably that need to hear that as well.
You know what? Fair.
In the podcasting space. But you're absolutely correct.
Last
you're absolutely
refuge
correct.
of the incompetent. Spectacular.
And, you know, we're not excluding ourselves from that category either.
No. Fully admitting. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
And today we're not even talking about Dune.
Hello, what's Dune? Who is she? Never heard of her.
Never. Does she go to this school? I don't think she does.
Ew.
Ew. Fetch. Today's episode is all about Foundation.
Oh my goodness.
And we didn't just start taking crazy pills this morning.
No.
We asked our patrons, what do you want us to talk about between God Emperor of Dune and Heretics of Dune? And Foundation was one of the winning subjects.
Yes. Yeah.
So I bought a copy from the fucking 70s.
Truly.
And it's the best smelling book I've had in years. This is great.
Wow.
Anyway, picked up the book. We are going to be doing a mini book club series on Foundation, 2 episodes covering first half, second half. But before we get into all of that, let's take care of some housekeeping.
Let's indeed. To start off, spoiler warning today for the conversation. There will be, inevitably, because this is a Dune podcast, many comparisons to Frank Herbert's Dune novels.
Right.
So make sure you have at least read God Emperor of Dune before you continue listening today. Luckily for you, we have covered the first 4 Dune books up through God Emperor of Dune in book club fashion, chapter by chapter, diving deep into the pages of Frank's story. So if you haven't read them yet, go back, get caught up, and then join us today for Foundation.
Yeah, this episode will be waiting for you. I know it can be tempting, especially if you're a new listener to Gom Jabbar and you're like, oh man, I just got through 2 book clubs. I want to take a break, listen to something else. I would say go listen to 3 Body Problem, the book club series that you're doing, Abu, on the Science Fiction Book Club podcast. Similar to what we do here. Excellent. And they don't spoil Dune.
Dune, right.
Every few sentences. So for sure, this will be here waiting for you. And fun fact, those are all good books. So get through them, and then you can come back to this in the order that we're releasing it.
That's right.
The Gom Jabbar Cinematic Podcast Universe. Now, as always, we want to give a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons: Case Aiken, Daniel Dion, Roman Caballo, Jonathan Lambert, and C.R. Spruill. Guys, the psychohistorians talked a lot about Harry Seldon. Who the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Didn't say nearly enough about you all and how excellent and generous and wonderful you have been.
Truly.
Top stuff. Yeah. Top marks.
I need a Encyclopedia Galactica on your generosity.
It's going to take 500 years to assemble.
So long.
Thousands of lives.
Thank you so much for your support. And of course, look, we also want to include our patrons at all levels, and of course our listeners who tune in every single week to this show and help make it possible. Y'all will also get a chapter in the Encyclopedia Galactica of Gom Jabbar, so don't worry about it. We are grateful to you as well, so thank you so much.
We really are. I think especially coming off of a break, it's like, man, we get to do this because of them. Like it's a very humbling thought, and we do not take it for granted. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about today's episode, the game plan. Like we do with our normal book club episodes, we are going to summarize the reading for today, Then we'll dive deep into some bigger themes and ideas in sort of a takeaways section. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by sharing our favorite moments from the book so far and assigning your homework for the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, it's easy. It's just the whole rest of the book. But yes, that'll be the plan for today.
That's right.
But before we get into that, before we set off into Foundation, let's take a quick break. And when we're back, we're going to hit you with the summary. Don't go anywhere. Like 6 sign-offs.
Right.
We'll be here.
See you in a minute.
Hasta mañana.
Adios.
Hasta later.
Welcome back, folks. Let's dive into this incredible and iconic sci-fi novel, Isaac Asimov's Foundation. And before we get to the specifics of the chapter summaries, we wanted to start, because this is the beginning of the book, we wanted to start by providing some extra context.
Yeah.
And give some background and history about the book itself, but also about Isaac Asimov, because I think it's very useful to know this going into the story. So to begin, a very brief bio of Asimov himself. Isaac Asimov was born in Russia in 1920, and he immigrated to the U.S. when he was just 3 years old to, I don't know if you've heard of this place, Leo, this little old neighborhood,
Sure.
kind of a quiet place called Brooklyn, New York.
Hey, that's the place where Muad'Dib never calls his mother.
Always skipping the prayers.
Also, weirdly, if I look outside, I think I see Brooklyn, New York. Weird. Am I Isaac Asimov?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I've never seen us in the same room. It's possible.
That's true. That's possible. Now, Asimov went to Columbia. He graduated.
Oh, never mind. That wasn't me.
Right. Certainly not smart enough to get into Columbia. He graduated in 1939, and he then worked at a naval aviation experimental station in Philadelphia during World War II, because 1939 is kind of a rough year for the world.
For sure.
After the war, he went on to get his PhD in chemistry from Columbia and graduated with that PhD in 1948, and then began working at Boston University, where he pretty much kind of stayed for the rest of his professional career. You
know what's so frustrating? That already sounds like such a successful life.
I know, right?
And then he's like, oh, I've got this side hustle creating all of modern sci-fi.
Yeah, truly. Just that biography alone feels like,
hey, good job.
Good job. You succeeded at life, man. And he's like, no, hold my
beaker. I mean, he's a PhD in chemistry, right? Hold my beakers. Right. I don't know how chemistry works.
Don't spill it. It's acidic. And of course, just to wrap up this quick bio of Asimov here, obviously, as we are joking, he is probably most famously known for writing the iconic science fiction novels Foundation, and of course, later on, his robot series, if y'all have ever seen that Will Smith movie, I, Robot, based off of Asimov's writings.
Yeah, it'd be so funny. You'd be like, Isaac Asimov? You're like, yeah, absolutely. And you're like, Foundation? They're like, what the fuck is Foundation? I was talking about the university professor, with the PhD.
The Boston University professor?
He had a great career in the war. Like, who are you talking about? You're like, I think the same guy, but now I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Well, talking about Foundation, so I just want you to hear this section and understand that this is parallel to everything we were just talking about, because again, it's like this is in the 40s, 1941. He began writing Foundation at the age of 21 years old.
What?
Which makes me, as a 34-year-old, feel real old. I mean, God.
I think I just grew 10 more gray hairs.
I think I watched it happen. That was incredible. Nice webcam. He also did this after meeting the iconic sci-fi magazine editor, John Campbell Jr.
This
fucking guy, who would become a young mentor for the young writer. I mean, a lot of people credit John Campbell Jr. for kind of shaping Asimov's journey as an author.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And this is when John Campbell Jr. was the editor for Analog Science Fiction and Fact, which at the time was titled Astounding Stories of Super Science.
Honestly, amazing.
Which is great, although John Campbell Jr. was the one to initiate the title change because he was trying to push sci-fi as a genre away from camp.
Right.
Away from the, like, you know, this is like a nickel book that you buy from the grocer.
Oh,
that's just like
fascinating.
ray guns and aliens and shit. He wanted like human stories. And that's also why, fun fact, the same magazine published Dune.
Yeah. Look at that little crossover event.
It's wild. I mean, it's just insane. I also, no, there's more to say about that later. Now, another fun fact here is the part one of this book. So if you, like me, picked up a copy of Isaac Asimov's Foundation, you'll see it's in parts. Each part has chapters and all that. Mm-hmm. Part one, titled The Psychohistorians, was not published at the time of this initial serial publication of Foundation.
Yeah.
This is a book exclusive. So initially, Isaac Asimov's Foundation started with part two, The Encyclopedists, which at the time was called Foundation, which debuted in May 1942, which is just nuts. Also because we see so many similarities between this and Dune, to think that this began publishing 20 years before Dune.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, we're going to call this foundational, like unintentionally, but accurately. A lot.
Yeah, totally.
Now, the trilogy was released piecemeal from 42 to 49 in the magazine, and later was collected into the 3 books that we know today. Like if you go to Barnes & Noble or whatever, you'll see. Those are the books you see today. In 1966, right after Dune came out, the trilogy won a special Hugo Award for the best sci-fi series of all time.
What a flex!
Now, this is actually the same year that Dune won Best Novel in a tie with This Immortal by Roger Zelazny, which I don't even know what that is. So, sorry, Roger.
Yeah, I've never heard of This Immortal, but I just thought it was really interesting. When I pulled up the Hugo archives and dug back to 1966, the very first thing at the top is Best Novel, Dune by Frank Herbert / This Immortal by Roger Zelazny.
Cool.
So the same year that Dune seemingly won a really huge award from the Hugos is also the year that Foundation was given clearly what sounds like a special, just like they made this award up just like, to give it to Foundation.
We gotta come up with something. This book's fucking incredible.
Yeah.
I also wanted to, as a quick thing, I clearly didn't pay attention in Dune class. I made the mistake and was like, I think John Campbell Jr. must be a Kwisatz Haderach messiah. He single-handedly picking these beautiful diamonds out of the rough. And then I found out he was like a really shitty person, like
alas,
kind of a shitty, awful person. So in case anybody out there is doing what I was doing, which is putting him on a pedestal, just know he had a very good taste for authors and a good editorial sense. We got some of his letters in the Road to Dune episode that we did, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
He's the reason Alia lived.
Crazy, yeah. Like significant events in Dune were shaped by John Campbell Jr.'s feedback to Frank Herbert, yeah.
Anyway, so very, very cool.
Right.
Interesting history. And just keep in mind, Asimov, in addition to, contributing to, like, what was it? Naval Aviation Experiment Station in Philadelphia, getting his PhD in Columbia. Being a chemist, being a university professor. He also was writing the best sci-fi book series of all time, according to the Hugo Awards, starting when he was 21. So,
incredible!
Pretty sweet.
What a life, and what a man, and what a story.
Yeah, insane.
And I think that's just fun context to have going into the story itself. I think it paints things in a different light. Especially the fact that he wrote this in his early 20s.
I was like learning how to shotgun beers, and he was writing the best sci-fi book series of all time.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the best sci-fi series of all time, according to the Hugo Awards in 1966. With our chapter summaries, we're going to take it part by part. So let's begin with part 1, The Psychohistorians.
Yes.
Foundation kicks off here with the arrival of a young mathematician named Gal Dornick at the imperial capital planet of Trantor. And Gal is here to basically start his new job working with the renowned mathematician and psychohistorian Harry Seldon. Ever heard of him?
I have not. Let's keep reading.
Let's keep reading. Gale, unfortunately, like basically from the moment he arrives, learns that the imperial authorities and the powers that be on Trantor are not happy with Seldon,
right,
because Seldon, using this study of psychohistory that basically he has established, can predict trends across thousands of years.
Yeah.
And his math has unfortunately shown him the inevitable collapse of the Galactic Empire, followed by a 30,000-year dark age of war and poverty and destruction.
Yeah.
Gal is quickly swept up in all of Seldon's bullshit and in Seldon like annoying the authorities. Gal gets arrested, Seldon gets arrested, and they are both quickly put on trial. So first day on the job is pretty rough here for our guy.
Yeah.
Now, during this trial, Harry makes his sales pitch, basically. He says that he is working on this project, the aptly named Seldon Project, which aims to create an Encyclopedia Galactica that contains all of humanity's knowledge, effectively shortening that period of chaos, that 30,000 years, down to just a nice, tidy 1,000 years before humanity can get back on its feet.
Yeah, that's very cool. I like that concept a lot.
It's a really interesting concept. And again, he's leaning into this idea that my math shows the Empire will fall.
Right.
It is too late to stop that trajectory.
Yeah, yeah.
But what my math, like the glimmer of hope we have here, that my math reveals, is we can shorten how bad it is after. And that's sort of his goal.
Like a 1,000-year warring period is much better than humanity collectively struggling for 30,000 years to rebuild science.
Yes.
That can be avoided.
It's a strong sales pitch. I'm certainly sold.
Yeah, same.
Now, after the trial, on day 2, he's pulled into a more private meeting, just sort of one-on-one with the authorities, because they don't want him to continue publicly speaking about this.
Yeah.
And they're basically annoyed. They want to remove Seldon and his very problematic ideas about their great empire collapsing. They want to remove him and his ideas from Trantor. So they give him an ultimatum. Take your project elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or we will execute you.
Right.
So naturally, Seldon accepts exile, and it's agreed that Foundation will thus be established on a planet called Terminus, all the way at the way far edge of the galaxy where they can't bother anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Supposedly. And of course, as part 1 wraps up, we learn that Harry Seldon, this motherfucker, has been orchestrating this whole thing all along.
Right. Yeah.
Gal Dornick was obviously used here as bait.
Yeah. As like a catalyst, right? Like
as a catalyst.
He knew that it was going to happen. He's like, if I show up to that guy's hotel room and, whatever, it's going to speed shit up, and I need stuff to...
Right. I'm being watched. They're going to do this, XYZ. He's making all the dominoes fall in exactly the way he wants the dominoes to fall. And Gal learned here at the end of this first part that Seldon orchestrated all of this. The arrest, the trial, even the exile he predicted, down to the very planet.
I love that so much. Gal's going, oh my God, 6 months to move 100,000 people. That's impossible.
How could we?
And he's like, it's okay. We've been preparing for 2.5 years.
Oh my goodness. What a flex. We have a lot to say about Harry later in our takeaways. What a guy. But that wraps up part 1 of the book.
Yeah.
An amazing introduction.
Let's jump 50 years into the future. And I just want to say, as a first-time reader, I was only becoming comfortable with the universe. And then immediately time jump, all the characters I know are gone. And I was like,
yes.
Fuck, this sucks.
Yes. I forced my book club at work. We used to have a regular book club, and I forced them to all read Foundation with me one time. And this was a major complaint that I got from a lot of them, because many of them aren't sci-fi readers. This was like sort of already a weird story to them.
Right, right.
And then to get to know a character as cool as Harry Seldon, or to get to know someone like Gale Dornick, and then just
leave them,
never ever see them again. And the time jumps, I think, were very jarring for someone who wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, but I will say what it did for me eventually, because I stuck in there, is it emphasized that the consistent character, the through line, is not Harry Seldon, it's Harry Seldon's plan. And that's the important thing. And so
absolutely. I'm glad you nailed that.
Of course, because that becomes clear as you go through these time jumps. The consistent through line is the psychohistorian's predictions.
Yep.
And not like, we don't care about this flesh bag where we're worried more about like the history and the future of humanity.
Absolutely. Totally.
So part 2 picks up 50 years later on Terminus, where, hey, Foundation was successfully established and is operational.
Hell yeah, bro.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah, brother. Only 5 years until the very first publication of the first volume.
Whoa.
I'm sure that's
nice.
going to be huge and the most important thing that will happen to anybody.
Totally.
We meet, I have to say names. We meet Louis Perrin,
yeah,
the chairman of the board of trustees of the Foundation. Big old nerd. Mm-hmm. And then we meet Salvor Hardin.
My guy.
If he doesn't have a literal cigar in his mouth, he's got a metaphorical cigar in his mouth because he's awesome. He's the mayor of Terminus City.
Right.
And basically the two men can't be more opposed. Perrin is like a by-the-books nerd. He's like, the encyclopedia is the most important thing we're doing. It's our holy task, basically. While Hardin is much more of like a hard-nosed pragmatist. He's very like, yeah, sure, but we've got like real fucking problems. Like this planet doesn't have metal. The galactic like supply chain is kind of falling apart these days. So we don't have the basics to function.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about? You know?
Yeah. There's a really great anecdote where Hardin makes it clear that the encyclopedists are actually, at this point, now a small subsection of this community.
Yes.
Most people on Terminus City are just like normal workers working on like farms and offices and
the planet alive.
They're just like working on a normal colony and have nothing to do with this fucking encyclopedia.
Right.
But Louis Perrin is like, no, the encyclopedia is the only thing we all should be working on and focused on. And Hardin, a bit more pragmatist.
Right. Certainly, they're at odds.
Yeah.
Now, case in point, the absolutely intolerable Anacreon ambassador, Hot Roderick. Hot Roderick just sounds like I'm saying Roderick can get it.
He's just a babe.
He's just a babe. He saunters in. Everyone notices. No, so Roderick visits from this newly minted kingdom of Anacreon. So the empire, the galactic fabric of the empire is kind of destabilizing, and this area around Terminus has become the Four Kingdoms, capital T, capital F, capital K. And basically, Anacreon is the most powerful and also the most aggressive. And Roderick is here to leverage some not so subtle threats on Foundation's independence. And I was getting physically angry at this fucking character. I hate this guy so goddamn much. And so he proposes, well, how about this? We'll have a military presence on your planet and you can supply us with resources. And Hardin's like, so like sheep and eggs and like wheat. And he's like, no, metal. And Hardin's like, tough luck, bitch. Got no metal for you. But Hardin, showing us some of his political savvy, drops a question. He's like, okay, actually, you know, this could be beneficial for us. You have like plutonium, right? Like we need some plutonium for our atomic power.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
Totally.
Right?
Right.
And Roderick's like, you have nuclear power? What? I mean, yes, no, maybe we don't have, I'll get back to you on that.
Yep.
Which, of course, hints to, Hardin, as well as us, the reader, that these four kingdoms, despite all of their showboating and all of their, like, we're the way of the future, they have fallen back on coal and oil. They are no longer using futuristic powers. I'll also point out, I thought this was great. When Gal Dornick arrives on Trantor, he's like, nuclear power? And the guide or whoever was like, oh no, we don't even use nuclear anymore. That's old fashioned. Now we use like geothermal for everything.
Yeah.
And so you see Trantor was ahead of that curve even.
Right.
And now atomic powers, that's aspirational for these four kingdoms.
Right. In just 50 years, that deterioration.
In just 50 years. That's so crazy. Yeah. Now, this also works as a bluff because the sort of implication here is that Terminus also has nuclear arsenal, like a nuclear weapon arsenal.
Right.
Which, for the bullish Anacreon kingdom, means a few months of like weighing their options and a few months of peace for Terminus. Now, after a visit from the equally insufferable Imperial representative, Lord Dorwin, Hardin makes it clear to the board that they basically can't rely on the Empire to protect them.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out, like, this was also incredible because it was this look at like political double speech where you ask someone a really simple question and then they say a lot and they do not answer the question at all. And that's basically the whole conversation. And so this guy leaves and everyone feels very comforted. And then they find out, no, the content of what he was saying, horseshit. Like none of it had any substantive like value. And Hardin actually has in his confronting of the board following Dorwin's visit, he has this incredible little monologue. Quote, "Throughout, you have invariably relied on authority or on the past, never on yourselves. It amounts to a diseased attitude, a conditioned reflex that shunts aside the independence of your minds whenever it is a question of opposing authority." And then later, "It's galaxy-wide. It's a worship of the past. It's a deterioration, a stagnation."
He said the
End
word!
quote. He said the word! The word of the day. Stagnation. Oh my gosh. So good. Fucking bars.
Amazing. Truly.
Kendrick Lamar could never. No, I don't mean to buy.
Kendrick, please don't.
Kendrick, please. Releases a diss track on Gomjapar.
On Gomjapar.
Honestly, that'd be an honor. It would be an honor to.
It would, yeah. I would happily be steamrolled by Kendrick Lamar.
so effortlessly, yes. Anyway, back to Foundation. After this meeting, they're basically like, we're just going to wait because the vault is opening. This 50-year anniversary of the creation of Foundation's opening. We think that there's going to be a message from Harry Seldon recorded in the vault.
Right.
We're just going to wait, and hopefully that'll solve all of our problems. Hardin's like, fuck that. And quietly, he arranges a coup. He's going to take over all of Terminus. He's going to be the big man in charge, officially and formally, of everything.
Yeah.
Now, with all of these pieces in play, the board and Hardin gather into the vault, and they receive a message from Harry Seldon himself.
Oh, my goodness.
Boom. Sick. It's almost as good as a diss track from Kendrick Lamar. The pre-recorded kind of hologram message from Harry Seldon reveals that the compilation of the encyclopedia was basically bullshit. It was kind of a diversion. It was kind of a stay here and work very quietly and intensely on this thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's worthless. It's not really the book, whether or not you publish it, will not make a difference at all in all of history.
Hilarious.
Which is crazy.
Somebody check on Louis Perrin. Is he okay?
He's kind of fine. And I think there's that great moment where Hardin's like, he respects the scientists because they're just so quickly like, well, okay, we understand that we were given a false data set and okay, we can come to terms with this. And they're like defeated, but not morose, or at least I didn't get the sense that they were.
Yeah, I agree.
But the true goal of the Terminus thing, as Harry Seldon tells them, the Terminus Foundation, and then the other one that's kind of secret at Star's End, is to, well, raise a glorious second galactic empire from the ashes of the first.
Wow.
I will say, this still felt to me, and this might just be me as a first-time reader, this still felt to me like exactly what he told Gal Dornick back before, where he's saying, there's going to be 30,000 years of suffering and awful unless I do this thing.
Yeah.
And the thing that he was doing was not the book that he told the administrators on Trantor. It was the creation of these planetary, like, groups of multidisciplinary scientists who could keep those traditions alive. And then hilariously, he could not have psychologists or psychohistorians on the planets because they would fuck up his calculations. Because like a prescient person in Dune and another prescient person in Dune, you cannot predict the future of someone who can also predict the future. And psychohistorians would fuck up psychohistorians. Again, some really wonderful parallels here.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I don't think Harry lied in that court trial at all.
Right.
That is his plan, to reduce human suffering after the Empire collapses. He just kind of conveniently left out the part where he was like, yeah, also my people, my foundation, will be the seed of a new empire also. Right. So
it's not just the people with the book in their hands. He conveniently left
that part out.
Yeah. Well, again, and it makes perfect sense. It's like you have this like self-sustaining little group of scientists out in the, isolated from everything.
Yeah.
Shit's going down. People don't have nuclear power anymore. And you go, oh, yeah, no, we still have engineers and we still have.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's the power. That's the power that the foundation has, right?
Yeah. Harry Seldon, you rat bastard. All right, let's talk about part 3. Speaking of nuclear power, we see it at play. In part 3, we open up 30 years later, yet again, another time jump.
Yep.
And this time we are with a much older Salvor Hardin, who is firmly established.
God, dude, if this was new characters, it would have bucked me again.
Oh, yeah?
But the fact that it was Hardin again, I was like, oh, I get more time with Sweet.
I mean, Hardin is just such an amazing character. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So we stick with Salvor Hardin for sure. It's only 30 years later, and this time he is well established, as the mayor of Terminus City.
Yeah.
He's the guy in charge. But of course, he is facing his first serious political challenge from this group of youngin' troublemakers
Siona,
led by this little twerp. Right. They're getting in and killing all his D-wolves. It's annoying.
Stealing his journals. So annoying, yeah.
God damn it. And this little group of rabble-rousers in the council are in particular led by a guy named Seth Cermak. We learn in the opening paragraphs of part 3 basically what has occurred over the last 30 years. Hardin has basically managed to waylay any issues with the surrounding 4 kingdoms by very smartly playing them against one another, all while helping them reclaim lost technologies and science. The Foundation has kind of become the source of a lot of science for these kingdoms, and so we're in sort of this happy stalemate right now. A key piece of Hardin's brilliance in all of this was the creation of scientism, which is a constructed religion surrounding the gifts that they've been giving the kingdoms.
So good.
Hardin knew that the advanced science that the Foundation was working with would appear to these kingdoms, who were now sort of falling backwards in scientific progress, basically as magic.
Right.
It would be so advanced to them that they wouldn't be able to distinguish it from magic.
Yeah.
Or religion.
So he's like,
and
fuck
so
it.
He leans in.
We're magicians.
Right. We're magicians. We're priests. This is religion. God ordained this.
Yeah.
Here's a nuclear silo. Whatever the case may be. Nevertheless, Anacreon is still being annoying as fuck.
Always.
And continues to pose a pretty significant threat to the security of the Foundation. And in particular, it's becoming increasingly aggressive. And this is what has the group of young council members riled up. They basically want to find a military solution. They want to preemptively strike against Anacreon in some way to secure Foundation's future, while Hardin, very famously, wants to avoid conflict. Obviously, his iconic line, "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent."
Yeah.
He's committing to that more pacifist, diplomatic approach. And this is riling up some feathers in the council.
Yeah. I also appreciate that that's the first thing that he'll point to, but that is also a front, right? Because he has his like deeper understanding of Seldon's plans.
Yeah.
So I do love that he has it like embossed on like a sign, and he's like, "That's why I'm doing what I'm doing," and everyone goes, "Oh, he's so annoying with that," and that's also bullshit. Like it's just it's so good.
Dude, he's such a schemer. This dude is playing 5D chess at all times. It's truly incredible.
He clearly lives for it.
Yeah.
He's not putting this on. He is not Leto going, I have to talk to my propagandists now. He is a political machine. And I also love that, going back to the very first part, Harry Seldon says about the administration, they are politicians. And politicians, by their very responsibilities, have to be a little bit of psychologists themselves.
Yes.
And so, by being the only really politically minded person in this fucking story, he's got superpowers compared to all of these other people who have no training in psychology at all. Yeah. It's really cool.
It's really cool. Hardin. I can't say enough good things about Hardin. Anyway, back to our summary. Part 3 continues when Hardin learns of basically this messy, tumultuous political situation taking place on Anacreon. Basically, there's a young king who's coming of age. There's an uncle who's trying to kill him, assassinations, blah, blah, blah. Very Game of Thrones. And he gets this info because, again, playing 5D chess all the time, Hardin has an inside man who also happens to be the head priest of Anacreon, Polly Verisov.
Yeah, convenient.
And Polly comes to Hardin and basically urges, much like the young council members, urges Hardin to do something about this, like take preemptive action, because the Anacreonians, and particularly the regent, this Uncle Waynus who's in charge, are like fully ready to attack the Foundation. Polly also tells Hardin that a galactic battlecruiser, one of the older Imperial technology that's now so much more advanced than where the Empire currently is, has been found near Anacreon, and Anacreon is not so politely asking the Foundation to repair it to them and to gift it to them.
Right.
You know, like, you're our allies. Be nice. Do this for us. You guys know how to fix a cruiser of this technology.
Right.
It's definitely not so we can attack you.
We promise we won't attack you with it.
Exactly. And to Polly's shock, Hardin's like, yeah, okay, let's fix it for them.
Yeah, okay, let's do it.
And Polly's like, bro, what have I been telling you for the last 20 minutes? Are you listening? But Hardin's like, Polly, buddy, you know me, trust me. This is all part of Seldon's plan. We're going to repair the ship for Anacreon, and it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
Trust in what Harry Seldon told us. Trust in what I have going on. It's going to work out. Let's do this. So, and we'll talk a bit more deeply about this because he says some very interesting things here to Polly in particular.
100%, yeah.
Now, the young revolutionaries have really had it up to here with Hardin, and they are eager to oust him. They're ready to impeach. They're ready to move against him. But Hardin pulls a bluff to buy himself some time. He reminds everyone that it is almost the 80th anniversary of the Foundation's creation, and hey, maybe it's about time Harry Seldon will have another message for us. So let's all get ready to gather at the vault on the 80th anniversary. Harry Seldon will surely have another important message for the Foundation. Absolutely bluffing here, probably working off of some instinct, but it buys him just enough time to get to the anniversary and to the vault opening day, which is all the time he needs, because he's headed to Anacreon in person to pull just the most incredible, like, 3D, 5D chess maneuver on the Anacreonians. Yeah. It's unreal. It's so cool. This is fully just plans within plans at this point from our boy Salvor Hardin. Waynus takes Hardin prisoner the moment he arrives. Hardin is completely unfazed by it. He's almost bored during this entire interaction.
Okay, I'm a prisoner of war. Is that it?
Oh no!
I thought this was going to be more fun.
And of course, there's a number of flexes here from Hardin. Waynus is like, "Well, I've just sent the fleet toward the Foundation. It's over for you, fool." And Hardin's like, "Oh, you kind of sent it early. I expected you to. Wouldn't it be more cool to send it at midnight, bro?" And Waynus is like, I the fleet's on the way. Didn't you hear me? So there's a lot of really great interactions here between Waynus and Hardin. Hardin just being a badass. Basically, Hardin foresaw everything and planned for everything here. He knew Waynus was about to attack here at the coronation. And basically, he has set the stage. On his cue, Anacreon goes dark.
Yeah. Oh.
Foundation pulls the plug on all the technology they've given to the Anacreonians. The whole fucking city goes dark. Everything powers off. And the priests on Hardin and Polly Verisov's orders have been telling their followers that the Anacreonians have committed an incredible sin in attacking the Foundation and attacking the source of the Holy Spirit. And even on the ship itself, on the Imperial ship that has been repaired and is on the way to attack the Foundation at this moment, a scientism priest who clearly believes in the Foundation as a religion takes over the ship and has everyone turn around and head back toward Anacreon, and even even forces Waynus' son to send a message back.
Right. Basically
condemning Waynus' actions as unholy and corrupt and sinful.
Right.
And that's it. That's it for Waynus. He realizes he has lost this chess game that he didn't even know he was playing.
Yeah.
There's a silly moment where he tries to shoot Hardin, and Hardin is wearing literally like a force field that's so advanced technology that Waynus is utterly taken aback by it. It's incredible. Waynus takes his life. He knows this is the end of the rope. And upon returning to the Foundation, Salvor Hardin is heralded as a hero. He has enacted peace treaties with all the kingdoms thanks to this little maneuver of his, and secured safety for the Foundation once again. Now, the final moments of this chapter, we return to the vault because we still got to play out Hardin's little bluff here.
Right, yeah.
Is Harry Seldon even going to show up? Johann Lee, Hardin's sort of like best friend and sidekick in all of this, is super stressed. I love how anxious this dude is all the time.
Yeah.
But luckily for everyone, the bluff once again pays off. Seldon does appear. He drops a hot new EP for everyone to listen to on repeat. And he delivers another message for the Foundation, basically confirming that this was the second crisis. And congrats, y'all. You've made it past the second crisis. You're 80 years into this 1,000-year adventure. Good luck on the next 920.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, and we'll probably talk about this again later, but I, rereading this as we were preparing the script, nearly lost my mind when talking to Gal Dornick, Harry Seldon says, quote, "And these successors will be able to apply the final touch in the scheme and instigate the revolt on Anacreon at the right time and in the right manner." End quote.
Goodness.
And I was like,
I mean, spoiler alert.
Wait, you spoiled part 2 in part 1. That's so rude. But of course, it's like wrapped up in oh, it's so good.
It's so good in the mystery of psychohistory, and some really fun foreshadowing in the way Asimov is playing with time here in this story. So fun. All right, so that's our chapter summaries, a bit of a dive into parts 1, 2, and 3, and a bit of background and history on Asimov and the book itself. Let's take a quick breather, Leo.
Yeah.
Because after the break, we're going deep. We're diving into some of the big thematic takeaways from the first half of this book.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to talk about. So we'll see you all in just a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. It wasn't 30 years. It wasn't 50 years. It was just a couple minutes. Let's talk about some sort of thematic takeaways that we've got from the book so far.
Yeah. And actually, before we dive into this, I wanted to ask you. I am a big Foundation fan. I read the whole series many years ago. I love it.
Yeah.
This is your first time.
Yeah.
So before we get into these takeaways, I just want to hear from you. What are you thinking so far? What's the vibe?
I love it. I think it's excellent. It did give me like major flashbacks to reading Dune for the first time, which was that the first, it takes some time to get into.
Yeah.
But once you kind of pick up on the rhythm of Asimov's writing, and once you start getting a sense of like, okay, this is the narrative that I should be keeping track of, it starts to roll a lot more gently, and it is very fun. I also, just like Dune, when you go back and you reread, there are so many little excellent details that are easy to miss on the first read because you have to kind of settle into this, I'm just going to keep reading and trust that things are going to make sense, like mode, basically. And though it's always a little bit jarring when we jump forward some number of years. I think those jumps are being used really well. And like I said, going into part 2 just a few minutes ago, I do think that does a good job of establishing for me as the reader, let's not worry about individual characters. The more important thing is the arc of the story, as has been outlined by Hari Seldon.
Absolutely.
So I can totally see why this book is as influential as it is, you know, especially if this came at a time in science fiction where everything was very like pulp science fiction, where, you know, they're wearing the like Zap Brannigan outfits and they're going, I'm going to shoot the laser and save the girl from the lizard monster. And that's sci-fi for decades. And Asimov is like, hold my fucking atomic blaster, bro. Like, I'm going to give you this fascinating exploration of society and culture across thousands of years.
Yeah. God
damn. I can't wait to keep reading. I almost literally can't wait to. I started reading the next chapter and then was like, I'm going to get confused. I need to stop.
Yeah.
And so it is sad to leave Gal and Hari Seldon so soon, so quickly.
Right.
I like those characters a lot. It makes sense in retrospect that this is like an additional chapter giving us a good introduction to the world before we pick up with the encyclopedists.
Right.
But not knowing what's going to come, I would not be surprised if we continue to get some glimpses of old Hari Seldon throughout the book series to come. So I'm having a great time.
Good. I'm so happy to hear that. I was a little nervous. I was like, I really love Foundation, and I don't want to color Leo's perception too much by saying too much.
God, this book fucking sucks. Oh, yeah. God.
I'm glad, much like Paul Atreides and Duke Leto, you have found your own way to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Love it. All right, well, let's dive a bit deeper then. Returning to our takeaways here, we want to start by, of course, talking about Hari Seldon, the GOAT.
Hell yeah.
And the very concept of psychohistory, which I think is just so fascinating and is one of my all-time favorite sci-fi ideas across many of the sci-fi properties and stories I've read in my life. Psychohistory is one that has stuck with me. So, talking about our guy Seldon here, first off, we got to make the connection, obviously, that he's got these like Kwisatz Haderach level abilities to predict the future, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, in this story, it's not because of drugs and genetics and the Bene Gesserit. It's because of math.
Sure.
He's just an amazing mathematician, and he's using this obviously fictional mathematics of psychohistory to predict the future. But what makes it so interesting is that it seems very plausible.
Yeah. We have talked about also the Kwisatz Haderach abilities and where they stem from.
Yeah.
And one of the possibilities, genuinely, is that you need Mentat training to help organize all of the data that comes with a wide awareness. And it is the Mentat abilities combined with the awareness of everything all at once that gives you the ability to look forward in time.
Yes.
Which is just psychohistory. If you give Hari Seldon all of the data and he has his formula, he can punch it into his little calculator and go with 99.8% confidence, this is what's going to happen in 1400 years.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, Jesus, what? So I do think this is very similar to Kwisatz Haderach. You're right that it's not like there's no spice agony necessary. There's no genetic memory necessary.
Yeah.
But it also feels like the same way that Frank Herbert said, Dune is going to be a universe of human capabilities explored to the nth degree. Mm-hmm. This is a human thing that we all know and do to some degree, taken to the nth degree. Saying, you know someone really well. You can tell how they'll react to some news or what they'll do in response to something. Take that concept, blow it up to the biggest it can be. And now you have someone who can say 1400 years from now, this shit's going to happen X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is a very Mentat-like ability here.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Hari Seldon, perhaps, even more than our guy Thufir Awad. Greatest Mentat in the galaxy.
I'm still pretty sure Jessica's the traitor. Still pretty sure. If he said it, it's got to be true, right?
Harry over here would be like, nope, 99.8% probability that she's not the traitor.
It's probably
actually.
Yui. I mean, listen, we've...
Look, I've done the math. Check my proofs.
It's Yui, yeah. But Harry Seldon would also come to the conclusion, I think, that it's not betrayal and that Huey is actually saving House Atreides. Anyway.
Right. He'd be playing his game of little 5D chess here.
Always, yeah.
One thing I do want to call out, there are limitations naturally to psychohistory.
Yeah.
It is not a perfect science, and I think that is what makes it so interesting. If it was just perfect prediction, it would be an incredibly boring superpower. You know?
Totally, yeah.
There are limitations, and throughout these first 3 parts of the book, we've learned some of them. So, for example, psychohistory is basically statistics and probability applied to an impossibly massive scale, to trillions of people in a galactic empire that spans, thousands, hundreds of thousands of star systems.
Right.
And as Seldon explains, it's not fortune telling. He's not out here like reading your palm and telling you this is going to happen in your life next, or like this is who you're going to fall in love with. He can't predict precisely the actions of certain individuals. He can't just look around and be like, okay, your mother warned me about me.
Yeah.
And he cannot predict small groups or individuals and what their actions may entail in small windows of time. What he's doing is he's relying on these calculations that look at social, economic, military trends, broad trends across huge timelines and across literally billions and trillions of people.
Yeah.
Those are the numbers he can work with that then give him an accurate shape of the future. And that is sort of where the magic of psychohistory takes place. He cannot look at just 1 or 2 people or a group of like a dozen people and know exactly what they're going to do, but he can predict perhaps what a group of 1 million people across the next 500 years may do.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And he kind of explains that relationship in the court trial, and I found it so interesting. The court lawyer was like, oh, well, can 100,000 people change the trajectory of the Imperium?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, because there's not enough time.
Right.
It would take too much time. It's too few people. It's like an inverse relationship of people to time.
Right.
It's really fascinating stuff. I loved the math geekiness of it all. And I think this is a genius stroke by Asimov because it adds a lot of dramatic tension, not only for the characters, right? Like Hardin is here trying to figure out the plan. The encyclopedists are wrapped up in the plan. Gal Dornick is wrapped up in the plan. But also we, the reader, are sort of wrapped up in the plan. We're along for the ride and we're like, what is Harry Seldon's plan here? What's going on? How are we going to make this work? I think it adds a lot of real interesting tension to the storytelling in a way that I think many stories that rely on prophecy kind of falter with, because if you have a prophecy, it's hard to not look at the story and be like, why didn't anyone see this coming? Wasn't there a fucking prophecy?
Wasn't there a fucking prophet character?
Wasn't there a prophet? Right. So I think Asimov does this brilliantly, and to his credit, Frank also does a very similar thing with making Paul's prescience unreliable.
Right.
And it adds that tension of like, you don't exactly know what's going to happen next, but there are extreme moments of foreshadowing, and it's really fun to see some of the foreshadow play out exactly as it was.
I will also say what I think both authors do very, very successfully, and I think part of why Asimov this succeeds so well. When Harry Seldon's talking about this in court, what he is describing is something that we all kind of intuitively understand about societies and civilization, which is true. He's saying, and I think about this a lot. We'll talk. I'll talk a little bit later about like the climate change issue, where there's a small group of scientists relative to the population of the planet going, no, we had to do something dramatic 20 years ago to prevent millions of deaths inevitably from all this stuff. And that is not enough to move things because it's too few people for how many people need to change their behaviors. So Harry Seldon says, well, 100,000 people seems like a lot, but compared to 40 billion on this planet alone, compared to trillions across the galaxy, it's nothing. That's not just him creating rules that we don't already kind of understand as readers.
Right.
And I think that's the magic.
Such a good point.
I think that's like what allows Asimov to then play within these rule sets he's created. Because if it were detached from reality, we would go, okay, I just have to take your word for that. And it's the same thing, I think, with why prescient beings can't see prescient beings in Frank's universe. if you think about what prescience is, the real ability to see the future and then to make a choice and to change things within limitations, that makes sense then why Paul can't see what another prescient being is going to do tomorrow, because that prescient being tomorrow might make a different choice based on what he's seen. That's a sort of intuitive thing that makes a certain amount of sense. Now, also, I mean, in Frank's universe, it's a little bit more inconsistent. You know, you have people like Alia, and what are Alia's powers? We're still not sure. Yeah. We get emails about that every 2 weeks.
Constantly.
Just regularly. Yeah. But nevertheless, I think there is that element of like, there are hard rules here that are being very well considered and we're very well followed. And then we're just exploring the ramifications of those rules in a way that's really, really satisfying.
Completely agree.
And I agree with you as well. If when you have like, oh, here is a character like Superman, he has no physical weakness. You go, okay, well, what are the stakes? What matters? And when you say, here is a person who can calculate to crazy accuracy what's going to happen in the next 1400 years, you say, okay, what are the stakes then? And you say, well, if people know that they are being measured, they might change their behaviors. If people become themselves capable of predicting things, then they can't be predicted.
Yeah.
So those are the limitations. And you go, oh, interesting. Okay, so then when someone like Hardin starts to figure shit out, he has to play that game of, I can't do stuff too preemptively with this knowledge that I've discovered. I have to be very careful and kind of behave the way that I've been told to behave.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Right. The tension becomes like, how accurate are these predictions? Do we let them play out as predicted? Can we tempt fate? You know, then it becomes almost these larger than life questions about fate and destiny and individual agency and how much our choices affect the path of, you know, it evolves into much bigger questions that, you know, sci-fi is very good at asking and exploring.
Totally.
But when you have that rule set to work with and begin with, that it becomes a launch pad and a base upon which you can then start building tension and asking these fun questions with the characters like Hardin and the storytelling like the Anacreonian Crisis.
I also think to the point you just made, like when it comes to individual agency, I think there's an underlying statement here about determinism and about people falling into these patterns, right? He can't tell about an individual. He can't be like, I know what Abu is going to do tomorrow. But what he can probably do is say, I can look at a certain like economic class of a certain like region and how that economic class reacts. And then disappointing to us in our perception of our own free will, we just do exactly what is predicted of us because that is how most of us behave all the time. We are very reactionist. And I think, you know, I've fallen into some rabbit holes here and there of watching people debate free will versus non-free will and hard determinism and especially in theism, and does God have a plan for you, and does he already determine where you're going to end up before you're even born and shit like that.
Right.
That's a whole, we could have a 3-hour conversation on that alone.
Absolutely. Right. Whether we're biologically predisposed to acting a certain way. So can we scientifically figure out that predisposition and just predict things? And then how does that account for outliers? And like then you get down these amazing rabbit holes about everything you just said.
Yeah.
So
and he's writing this book as a 21-year-old in the fucking 40s. It's so frustrating, but also really wonderful. And I think it's also a reminder that I think oftentimes of some of these ideas feel very modern, and that is my mistake. These are not modern ideas. These are the things that like Greek philosophers were debating.
Absolutely.
It's just using a vocabulary of a certain era. Anyway.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about Selden the man himself for a minute. His ideas, of course, are larger than life and amazing, but Selden himself is kind of larger than life and amazing too. In this opening part of the book, he's a total badass. And honestly, later on in parts 2 and in part 3, it's easy for me at least to kind of start relating with the people on Terminus and on Foundation who end up worshiping him as a prophet. Right. You know, you're kind of like, maybe this guy was a prophet. He's cool. And I personally just love a guy with a plan, you know, and Harry Selden perhaps has the biggest plan ever.
Dude came in swinging his plan around. I'm like, whoa, look at his big plan.
Damn. Wow, just giant throbbing plan. Now, in the trial in particular, which I loved, he is so incredibly charismatic and articulate that it's very obvious how he was able to convince 100,000 people to follow him, right? He almost has this like cult leader vibe about him.
Yeah.
And it's also very obvious why the Empire fears him. This dude is so charismatic and so easy to believe and so intelligent that like we can't put him in front of a microphone. That is such a
That's where you
risk.
Fucked up. You put him in court on the record. Right. Oh,
on
you fucked up. Can I just say also, love a good court scene? And I feel like there's this era of fiction, like Frank's done this in a bunch of his books, non-Dune books, of course, because like, what is court in Dune? But like, court scenes are so fucking fun.
Just inherently cool to begin with.
It's so cool because it's also the place where you realize the person wants to be on trial. And you go, oh shit, is this what they wanted?
Right. A framework to work within. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love a court scene. I will always be... I honestly remember stumbling upon Shawshank Redemption on TV many years ago by accident because the court scene was playing. And I just stopped what I was doing and watched it and ended up watching the whole movie, which of course is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So back to the trial. I did want to call out a quote in particular. There's many great quotes from Harry Seldon in this trial.
Truly,
his clapbacks are absolutely savage. And many of the things he's saying here are truly sort of laying the foundation, pun intended, for a lot of this book's political themes and commentary. This quote in particular stuck out to me, though. Harry says, quote, "The fall of empire, gentlemen, is a massive thing, however, and not easily fought. It is dictated by a rising bureaucracy, a receding initiative, a freezing of caste, a damming of curiosity, 100 other factors." End quote.
It's so...
Just list your themes, why don't you, Asimov? Damn!
Receding initiative, aka stagnation. Damming of curiosity, same thing. That idea of like...
unscientific thinking.
Yeah, freezing of caste. Those like rigid...
class systems
that don't change or don't upend. It's so good.
Right. Rising bureaucracy, the government getting slowed and corrupt in this miasma of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Incredible. Again, these are very similar themes to what Frank explores in Dune as well, of course. This larger idea of stagnation. In Dune, Frank is more talking about just humanity and humanity survival in general and the idea of messiahs and leaders. Here, in particular in Foundation, Asimov is honing in on empires.
Right. Like
this galactic empire. And, you know, Asimov was obviously inspired by sort of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire as well here. Foundation is very much an allegory for that too.
I also just continue to think about real world examples of this. And I remember watching the movie or the miniseries, the limited series, Chernobyl.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And you see like red tape and bureaucracy get in the way of people doing things, like getting shit done. And lots of people died and were hurt because people were like afraid to take responsibility because we have to file the correct paperwork and we have to do these things through the right channels and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'll also say that although this book is a lot less ecology focused than Dune, like we're really not looking at like the ecosystems and like what, you know, the theme is very present when Chen, the like administrative, basically the, as Gal Dornick points out, kind of the head of the galaxy.
Right.
Because he's the one, he's not a figurehead. He's the one making administrative choices regarding who's punished and who's not. He asks, quote, "Dr. Seldon, you disturb the peace of the Emperor's realm. None of the quadrillions living now among all the stars of the galaxy will be living a century from now. Why then should we concern ourselves with events of 5 centuries distance?" End quote. Which... my fucking God. I mean, say the quiet part out loud, first of all. But also, that is absolutely, I firmly believe that a lot of our lawmakers in various countries around the world suffer from this quiet assumption of, I'm not going to be here. So why do I have to, like, I don't know, treat it with that sort of visceral, impending quality that it has for maybe someone who's in their 20s. So I think this is like super, super poignant in 2024. And I think that's another hallmark of like a really excellent story, a very human story, that these things are going to continue to be relevant for as long as we are reading books.
Yep. Timeless.
And again, Bene Gesserit out here making long-term plans.
That's right.
Harry Seldon making long-term plans. Can we get a Bene Gesserit or Harry Seldon in Congress? Or fucking somewhere making decisions.
Right.
My
anywhere,
God.
Please.
Oh.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to touch on with Harry Seldon as a person.
Yeah.
We love him, obviously, as a character. We love him and perhaps even consider him a prophet. But it's worth acknowledging he is human at the end of the day. True. And it's also worth acknowledging that he's also kind of insufferable in his own way.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine how exhausting it must be to be around someone like Harry Seldon? Someone who's constantly telling you the probability of shit happening. Like, that party trick is gonna get old very fast.
I was gonna say, there's the quote, "Before you are done with me, young man, you will learn to apply psychohistory to all problems as a matter of course." End quote. So now I'm really picturing him like at a bar talking to a young woman, and he's like, according to psychohistory, you're likely
probability says,
girl. I got a big old plan.
Hello. Yeah. He is an exhausting person to be around. And I think just someone with such intelligence, such arrogance, truly, and such big personality, inevitably. Like, he has the gravitational pull to bring in 100,000 people and get them to go into exile for him. That comes with the territory a little bit.
Yeah.
He is, always scheming and frankly outright lying to people to their face.
Yeah.
Like Gal Dornick, poor guy, was on the receiving end of that on day one of his new job.
Yeah. Welcome to Trantor.
Welcome to Trantor, buddy. Welcome to working for Harry Seldon. It's tough. It's tough being constantly hoodwinked and puppet mastered by this guy. And so it must be rough.
Yeah, it's gotta be exhausting for sure. In the same way that it's like a Mentat being like, prime computation, you're going to take out the trash tonight. You're like, shut up.
You son of a bitch, the fear. It's your turn.
You bastard. Yeah, I've done it the last 3 times. Prime computation, no.
Totally. So we love Harry, but yeah, people like him, I'm sure, geniuses like him can be tough to be around. For sure. And we see that from Gal's perspective.
Now, the next kind of theme we wanted to talk about is stagnation, word of the day, science, and passivity.
Yeah, big themes.
Oh, and super related to Dune. Like, my God, as a fan of Dune, I was my hackles were rising. I think that's a word. And I'm sure many of our readers as well, if you're reading this for the first time or the 10th since reading Dune, it is shocking how much the idea of stagnation is central to Seldon's theory that the Empire will collapse. It is also then a frustration of Salvor Hardin in dealing with the Board of Trustees. Like, this is key to every part that we've read so far.
Yes, a through line.
Now, during a discussion with the board after Roderick's visit, Hardin launches into this amazing rant on the topic of scientists and science, which I found to be really kind of fun.
Yes.
Quote, "What kind of science is it to be stuck out here for centuries classifying the work of scientists of the last millennium? Have you ever thought of working onward?
What?
Extending their knowledge and improving upon it? No. You're quite happy to stagnate. The whole galaxy is, and has been for space knows how long." End quote.
My space.
Space,
damn it.
Space, damn it. I also love that by, I think, like the third part, Seldon becomes like an invocable name. You're like, by Seldon this thing.
Yes.
So fun.
So cool.
But yeah, the idea of stagnation and its danger, incredible. It's so fun to see it explicitly called out.
Right. And I think this idea continues to be a frustration for Hardin because we see this,
oh my God, yeah,
like passive and stagnant mindset really come to the forefront when this fucker Lord Dorwyn shows up from the Imperium, right? Dorwyn claims to be an archaeologist.
Yeah.
But we come to learn that he's never actually done any archaeology. He's only ever studied books on archaeology.
Now, why would I go out in the dirt just to get all dirty? I've read all the books.
Books tell me everything I need to know is his argument. And in fact, when Hardin lightly suggests, I don't know, maybe
you want to do
maybe you should go fact check what the books are telling you and explore
maybe
what the books
changed.
Anything? Yeah. He balks at the idea.
This also reminds me, I don't know if any of our listeners have read the fantastic, spectacular book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Wonderful, wonderful book. Have you read it, Abu?
I've never heard of it, no.
Oh, it's lovely. I think Suzanne Clark is the author. I have it somewhere. Anyway, fantastic book. But within that book world, all of the magicians of London are people who study magic. And none of them have done magic because, of course, that's crude. I'm sorry, you're asking if I, the greatest magician in London, do magic? I know more about magic than anybody. How dare you ask me that? No, I definitely don't. And then someone comes along who does magic, and the whole book starts. But feels very, there's a lot of parallels there, which was fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's that idea that reading a thing or watching a thing or hearing about a thing will never actually compare to experiencing the thing itself, whatever that thing may be. In this case, of course, it's the rigor of the scientific method and being able to actually go to these places like Arcturus or Sol to confirm what the books say.
Yeah.
But I think it applies to many aspects of life, I can watch a video of someone skydiving, but I certainly will not have the same feelings if I were to skydive.
Yeah.
And so there is this idea here of stagnation, being passive, not pushing boundaries, like in the magic story in London that you're talking about. You can study all the magic in the world. That doesn't make you a master.
Right.
It just makes you very knowledgeable about the magic of the past up to this point. But I think pushing the boundaries and exploring the unexplorable is a path to true mastery.
Totally. Yeah.
I also wanted to call out this Lord Dorwin chapter in the Foundation audiobook is absolutely hysterical because the narrator does this amazing job of leaving out all the R's or slurring all the R's. And so Dorwin truly is so insufferable and just sounds like this child putting on a fake accent this whole time.
Yeah.
So props to the narrator of the Foundation audiobook.
Excellent.
He did a great job with Lord Dorwin.
That's great to know. And then kind of to wrap up this point, later Hardin has this great conversation with Polly Verisov about the Imperial battlecruiser that gives major shades of the Golden Path.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too that I think this puts into context the idea of being passive and stagnation and when it is and is not appropriate.
Yeah. Because
there are quite a few characters who are we are the, what do they call the action party, the action political party?
Right, literally, yeah.
You would think that, they've got the right of it because they're not being passive, they're not being stagnant. But there are also times to not do anything. And we see that with Leto too in his Golden Path, Leto's peace, purposeful stagnation to spur on the scattering.
Yeah.
But we get this quote from Hardin, which is really just him recognizing that he has to give Anacreon the cruiser.
Yes.
He's like, oh yeah, I've got to.
Yep.
And Verisov pushes but so what the fuck are you doing? And he explains, quote, Harry Seldon said in the Time Vault that at each crisis, our freedom of action would become circumscribed to the point where only one course of action was possible. And then, as long as more than one course of action is possible, the crisis has not been reached. We must let things drift so long as we possibly can, and by space, that's what I intend doing. End quote.
Wow. So interesting.
So, regardless of what he tells people, violence is the last refuge. The last refuge of the incompetent. It's spectacular. Regardless of the fucking sign over his desk he points at, he is waiting for crises to get to a point where there is no other action. And then coincidentally, that lines up with the 80th year anniversary of the Vault. So he's going, I think this is all part of the plan. And he expresses, it's difficult because I maybe know more than Harry Seldon would have preferred.
Right.
Maybe I'm a little bit too keyed into psychology.
Yep.
But I think we're good for now.
Yeah.
And, of course, sure enough, he is right. And his 5D chess game goes perfectly.
Right. He's relying a lot on instinct here, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because psychohistory and Seldon's plan is really mapping out human instinct, right? What would humans instinctually do under these conditions with these factors in place, right?
Yeah.
And so Salvor Hardin almost has to check himself from over-analyzing the situation and just go with his base instinct. What would the instinctual reaction here be?
It's so good. It's
Which
so cool.
is really interesting because he's aware of, like you're saying, he's kind of aware of the plan, and he has to stop getting so meta about it in his head.
Yeah.
And he is kind of playing this game of 5D chess. I will say I felt this originally when I've read Foundation in the past, and I felt it again here.
Yeah.
It does feel like Hardin has a bit of a superpower of instinct. It's just like where his bluff perfectly pays off. Like, how the fuck did he know the vault was actually going to open on the 80th anniversary? He plays Waynus and Anacreon perfectly, and I think that's totally believable. He sets all of the chess pieces up. But yeah, you're kind of like, okay, Hardin, you are kind of playing our little hero's journey here, where you just always happen to know the right answer. And of course, he sets himself up to know that, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think to the larger point of this idea of stagnation, I think waiting to take action is not the same as like stagnating over time and taking no action.
Yes.
You know, I think
Agreed.
He is still making a choice here that is strategic and on purpose, and that is still some type of action. And so I don't think he's advocating for the kind of inaction that someone like Lord Dorwin or even the Encyclopedists are prone to.
Right.
Where here's the thing we do, and we can't go beyond this boundary, and the past is all holy, and, you know, kind of holding on to those old structures.
Yeah.
Hardin willing to tear any and all structures down when he needs to, but he'll do it at the right moment, and he's just waiting for that moment.
That's huge. Yeah, the idea that you can choose when to act is just as important as choosing to act.
Right. Taking your agency back is something Leto would be very proud of, you know?
Yeah.
Humans taking their agency back from fate. Crazy stuff. I mean, the Dune parallels are amazing. There is one final parallel to wrap up our takeaway section we wanted to touch on here. Religion and manipulation is a major theme in this story, particularly by the time we hit part 3. And the connections to Dune are very obvious, and many of our listeners will have picked up on them by now. I mean, Bene Gesserit, Lisan al-Gaib, Missionaria Protectiva. We see shades of all of this in Foundation here, in Scientism and Salvor Hardin. As we know, the Foundation's technology and the scientists themselves, the priests, quote unquote, are enshrined with this like religious sanctity.
Yeah.
And this helps Hardin control and influence the kingdoms around him without resorting to any sort of military action. Right. And obviously, this very much is giving Missionaria Protectiva.
Right.
The Bene Gesserit are not a military order in any sense of the word. They can certainly hold their own in combat, but they don't have a standing army. They don't need one. They are out here manipulating and seeding religion and prophecy in order to set the stage for control and influence down the line.
Yeah, and also as a contingency for what if.
Exactly.
Part of the Missionaria Protectiva is if a Bene Gesserit finds themselves in unfriendly lands, they have a pull shoot that they can activate.
Yes.
But until they activate it, it can just be the culture and religion of the people.
Right.
So for what it seems like 30 years, the Four Kingdoms are enjoying scientism as this real faith, and there's the spirit, the great spirit of whatever, the cosmic spirit or whatever it's called.
The galactic spirit.
Galactic spirit. And that's well and fine. It is when it comes to that crisis moment, Hardin pushes the button, activates the plan, the Protectiva, and suddenly they have a safety net, which is everyone's like, oh shit, it's real. Like, oh man. And then that guarantees safety past that second crisis, which is great.
Right. It becomes a lever of power that Hardin can pull on when he needs to exert influence, in much the same way that the Bene Gesserit do in Dune. I also found it interesting. So Selden's second message at the end of part 3 today, there was an interesting reminder there, though, that this lever of power only goes so far, right?
Right.
Selden reminds the Foundation, or at least advises them, to not directly attack the kingdoms around them. They cannot be the aggressors, right? They are given immunity thanks to this spiritual power, as he dubs it, this religion. It's a great defense, but it is not a good offense.
Right.
And so for now, they should remember that while they are relatively safe, they are extremely powerless still in the face of...
Yeah, like this is not the time to expand wildly.
Exactly. Let's not get any big ideas here that we are in control because of our religion. It is still a smaller force of power than the literal laser guns of the Empire.
Yeah, I also think it's a slow lever, right?
Yes.
I don't think the Bene Gesserit could take control of a planet quickly. It would take time.
Correct. Yep.
And it is very hard to combat. That's why it's like an ultimate defensive maneuver. But it is something that takes time. And they can't just I was thinking, oh, well, they can send out scientists, scientismists to ambassadors and envoys and, to other kingdoms. Great. And maybe that's what happens in the latter part of the book. But that isn't a tomorrow we now control those kingdoms with the same power and lever. You have to spread the religion. You have to spread and then that over time, you then have that control.
Right. And and this is sort of like game theory, war theory, right? Like you have your quick, decisive actions that are perhaps more destructive through military, but then you have sort of like cultural victories where you bleed your culture into an opposing nation. And these are all like different levers of power that have different timelines and different levels of effectiveness for offense and defense. And religion is just one tool in which you can create an empire, right? Again, the ultimate goal of Foundation is to create the second galactic empire.
Right.
And Foundation is just one of the first tools that they are using to do that.
Right.
It just all kind of goes back to that same idea of there's different spheres of influence and different spheres of power and control that something like an empire has to exert in different ways. And Foundation is still only 80 years in to a 1,000-year journey of becoming a full-fledged empire. And so they're just a seedling. And they only have a tiny bit of control right now. Yeah.
Selden has this whole little spiel about temporal power and then spiritual power using and it is interesting to see okay, here are the steps of mastering control and being assuring safety. I think also just to kind of wrap up this religion and manipulation topic, we see Leto 2 basically pull the same move as Hardin between Children of Dune and God Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Leto 2 knew that his word alone was not going to be good enough to exert the kind of control he needed to become the God Emperor and to kind of put humanity onto the golden path. So he shrouded his word in godhood. At Ganima's funeral, he spoke through as the ancestors of all of the Atreides, and he harnessed all of the beliefs and all of the feelings of the Empire. Everyone is now on board believing that his word is that of God himself. And it's no longer this faraway thing. It's literally Leto in front of them.
Yep.
And in kind of talking then to, I said it in the script here, Siona, but I think it might have been Hui when he was talking to Hui about religion. And the Bene Gesserit planning and his religion and Sihanouk and all of that.
Yeah, I think that might have been Hui, actually.
Hui is yo, are you cynical about all this? Are you ultimately cynical on religion? And that feels so manipulative. I think a lot of her critiques would fall squarely on Hardin as well, but that doesn't make them any less effective.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out, and this is also partially why Leto 2 was able to do what he did, and also why Hardin was able to do what he did. This quote jumped out to me. Quote, "For it is the chief characteristic of the religion of science that it works." End quote.
Amazing.
Which is a fucking baller flex and justification wrapped in one.
Right.
I also wanted to point out Isaac Asimov was an outspoken atheist. So I thought it was really poignant that he is including religion as this like tool and this piece of society and this means, this lever, this manipulation, kind of in the same way that Frank and Leto too, as an author and as a character, are using religion not from a place of profound and personal faith, but as a means of like manipulation and control. It feels very deliberate that Asimov is like using scientism, as a piece of his plot. As an atheistic person, felt very intentional.
Yeah. I mean, even as an atheist, like Asimov, I'm sure wasn't ignorant to how religion plays into human history and the rise and fall of human empires and the manipulation of the masses.
Totally.
And even just sort of the control of the masses. And yeah, it's very interesting that he's using religion in this way.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, the parallels to Dune, we could go on. There's so many more here. But that wraps up our takeaways, at least for today. This is only the first half of the book, believe it or not.
Yeah.
There is still another half of the book left to go in the second episode. But that's where we're going to call it today. To wrap up, though, one final question.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite moment of the book so far?
There's a few moments that jump out, but choosing only one, I think I really became enamored with Hardin as a character. I think we have the most time with him of anybody in the book so far, and he's so much fun.
Yep.
So him facing off against Waynus, the like uncle of Anacreon, the Anacreon like ruler. Yep. Him being like, "Oh, I'm a prisoner of war. Oh no, I couldn't have anticipated this." You know, that
so good.
I love a good game of 5D chess. I love Sherlock Holmes revealing his plan the whole time. I love that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And seeing how Hardin pushed all the pieces around feels so satisfying. And also goes to show what like a politically minded and psychologically minded person can accomplish.
Yeah.
In a world in which everyone is kind of abandoning that depth and is just going to like I like the quote from, I think it was the head priest and Hardin talking about Waynus, saying he's like a brutish and like violent man who considers himself to be very crafty. And that makes it all the funnier. It's also very fun then to reread with this sort of thing. Like whenever a character's playing 5D chess, it's fun to reread the passages where they're talking before the kind of gambit's revealed.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, the moment where he is like talking to Verisov, I think, and he goes, "Oh, I've just decided, by the way, I have to go to Anacreon."
Mm-hmm. Just decided my ass.
Yeah, I've just decided my ass. But it's like he's realized that that is what is necessary to like align the crises up.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And cool to reread and to know that that's the plan. Excellent. So that's my pick. It's that sort of like ultimate moment. And yeah, you're right. The atomic blast that gets absorbed into his glowing shield just like makes him look all the more radiant and like, so good.
I mean, maybe we'll do this in our second episode, but I'm so curious what your vision of Halvor Hardin looks like in your head.
Hot.
Salvor Hardin.
Hot. Just
he's definitely hot, but he's older. You know, he's like in his 60s in part 3. So maybe we'll do like a little fan cast or something in the next episode.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, maybe at the end of the book, we'll go through fan cast.
Go through the characters and do like a fan cast who we imagine in our mind.
You know, we could do a follow-up bonus episode where I'll watch the TV series. I know you already have, and then we can talk about it.
Yes, I've seen the TV series. Yeah,
that might be good.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Okay, well, that's my favorite pick. That's my favorite moment so far. What about you?
So for me, I've kind of mentioned this a few times throughout the episode today, but the trial of Harry Seldon, my goodness. I cannot get enough of a good trial scene.
Yeah, it's excellent.
And Harry Seldon is such a bombastic character, such an arrogant, intelligent asshole who's puppeteering everything in this book, and you literally love to read it. So that's my pick. The trial is amazing. Harry is giving off Bronzo of Ix energy the whole time.
Yeah.
And, we're huge fans of Bronzo here. And there's some really juicy back and forth that actually, speaking of the Apple TV show, I think was not captured as well as it could have been. This courtroom scene could have been like as good as the Shawshank Redemption courtroom scene, and it wasn't, unfortunately, in the TV show. They fumbled the ball there. But in the book, it is incredible. So I always love revisiting it in the book.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is the first half of Isaac Asimov's Foundation. Now, dear listeners, before we go, we have our wrapping up housekeeping, but we also have homework for you.
That's right.
If you're reading along with us, read the rest of the book.
Yes.
Basically just, read the end of the book. And we will we'll talk about it in part 2 of this little book club.
Yeah.
And then, of course, before we let you go, we want to remind you, as always, of some ways to support us and what we do here at Gom Jabbar.
That's right. So the 2 best ways to support us is to become a patron at patreon.com/GomJabbar, ad-free episodes, exclusive episodes, early access to book clubs like this, all of that and more over on patreon.com.
The ability to vote on the things that we talk about.
That's right. This episode happened because patrons voted. So patrons get to help shape this show.
It's true.
In addition to that, the second best way to support us is to get yourself something nice and check out the Dune-themed swag on our merch store at gomjabarshop.com. You can find links to both the Patreon and the merch store in the show notes below.
Indeed you can. And, of course, we love to hear from you. If you're reading along, if you read Foundation along with us, what the fuck did you think? Tell us. Email us. gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, you can also just drop a comment in the Discord. But send us your thoughts, your questions, pictures of your cute pets. All of it is appreciated. I recently responded to some emails that were sent to us over a year ago. So
nice.
We are doing our best. But
Hell
we do, in fact, read every single email. And it makes a world of difference to hear not only what is working and what's not. Feel free to give us any kind of feedback you have. We love to hear it.
Of course.
And, of course, if you want another way to support us, telling a friend about us, leaving us a 5-star review. These are all excellent ways. And those 2 are free. So you can support us without any pain to the pocketbook, so to speak. Now, here's the real question, Abu. Harry Seldon.
Okay.
How much do you think Harry Seldon fucks?
Oh, boy. Here's my answer. Not a lot.
Sure. Okay.
I think. As charismatic as he is, and of course he gives off cult leader vibes, he doesn't give off sex cult leader vibes, though.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think he's almost too much of a nerd, too much of like a professor math nerd, and he doesn't give off I'm a hot guy vibes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wager our guy Harry is not having a lot of sex, and he's just doing a lot of math.
I think the amount of sex he has, is exactly the amount that he could have without fucking anything up. I think he goes into, he's at a bar, and he knows that person wants to have sex with him, and he knows that it's just going to be a casual fling with no crazy ramifications, no feelings are going to get hurt. And I think for all of us, we've lived our lives and we've thought, oh, maybe that was someone who was interested in him. He knows. He's not in here. He's not in the dark. He knows. And he goes, you know what? Why not? I know it won't hurt anything. I'm going to bang tonight. So I think it's more than average, because I think on average we talk ourselves out of things. We go, oh, that person would never be interested in me. I do this a lot.
Right, that's true.
So I don't think he does that, but he's also not out here making mistakes. I think you're totally right. He's not like willy-nilly throwing his throbbing plan around.
That's a great point. He doesn't need Hinge or Bumble or any of those algorithms. He can just math his own probabilities.
He knows that she swiped right in her mind.
That's right. That is a bit of a superpower.
He bangs as much as he should. Precisely the amount.
Math never lies.
There's no judgment in math. My body count. There's no judgment in my body count.
Gal Dornick, not asking the right questions here, you know?
God, letting us all.
Gal, what
all...
is Harry Seldon's body count?
You'd think it would have gone down when he was in the wheelchair, but shockingly, skyrocketed. He had more time in his hands between recording messages. He goes back to reading the book, and then he's like, we're done? We're done recording? Okay, fuck this book. Come on, it's time. Let's go.
Jesus. Oh, goodness. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gamjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on Seldon's plan.
Yeah. We'll see you at Foundation 2.
We'll see you at the vault.